So hi, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning. Really, as Laurel said, we really want to talk to you during this session. Of course, we're going to tee it up. I'm going to interview David a little and coax some information out of him. But really, if you have specific questions that are bugging you about how platform teams could use the Flow framework, be sure to put them in the chat so you don't forget. And we'll definitely leave a lot of time for you guys to ask those questions. So let's get started. David, I'm going to start by asking you if you could just walk us through what your role is at Tasktop, like those two hats that Laurel mentioned. Tell us what it is that you do and are responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the PBS lead for our team, the team at Tasktop that provides a sort of developer platform for internal development, but also for operating our SaaS products. As a lead, I serve both as a manager and a product manager. Most of our customers are internal development teams, but even every department is our customer internally as well. You know, we do things for sales and engineering and a little bit for everybody, but mostly product development. We also have customer-facing SaaS products that we operate the infrastructure for as a service for the teams. So really what our main focuses are providing a platform for both the development, deployment, and operating of software so that developers can focus on developing their products.
Awesome. Okay, so David, when we posted a bit of a poll to the community and we said, who would you like to hear the most from about their experience using the Flow metrics? Would it be like an engineering manager or a product manager or someone who works on platform teams? And everybody voted. There were a lot of votes for platform teams, because I think that the common question that we get and that people have is, how can the Flow framework be applied to platform teams? Because, oh, the nature of our work is different. It's high interrupt. Our categories of work are different. We work less on development and more on operations and customization. So, you know, I know from you that you find the Flow framework especially valuable to platform product teams, but I was wondering if you could help explain why.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a platform team, we model ourselves more like a traditional development team, because I think platform teams are more similar to traditional development than they are different, but there's definitely things that make us different. And like you sort of indicated, why the Flow framework is important for us. So that high interrupt is one of those reasons. We have to be able to execute on larger projects while dealing with high interrupt. And by larger projects, I just mean the continuous development of the products that we offer. We look at everything that we build and provide as products. So, you know, things like deployment pipelines and software delivery applications. We look at that as all as a product suite. And what I actually found over the years, I've been doing this at Tasktop since the company is fairly small. As we grew, it became harder and harder to execute on larger products consistently without something like the Flow framework and paying attention to how you're putting your capacity towards interrupt versus you know, development, feature development, and defects and tech debt.
Right. And you know, we've kind of discussed that the modern approach is to treat infrastructure as code. So folks that do work on platform teams are, I mean, you know, are not such a snowflake after all. And do you find that like the Flow framework is an opportunity to kind of change the way organizations have typically treated platforms and kind of underinvested in them because they weren't considered platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think the Flow framework gives you a bit of an opportunity to demonstrate why investment in the platform is so important for the teams that it supports and what underinvestment can do for their flow as well. And absolutely, sort of the more modern move to infrastructure as code, you do end up having very sort of quasi-continuous integration sort of patterns and everything within that development. And it does start to model very much after software development, but definitely underinvestment in platform is a larger problem. And I think actually that the Flow framework allows you to sort of demonstrate what value you're getting out of increased investment there. You know, you can work with other teams to show how there's bottlenecks on your flow because of platform issues that need to be improved, and then to sort of drive investment that way.
Awesome. Okay. So David, we've asked you to prepare and walk us through a tangible example of how you've used and benefited from the flow metrics. So I'm just going to click through the slides for you, but you take it away, okay?
Sure, absolutely. So a little while back, we were, so one of our PDS is split into two teams, and one of the teams was sort of developing a new product that needs to be launched. And we're starting to notice, even across the PDS, certain things were starting to slow down, and sort of the throughput, the flow velocity was getting a little bit lower than before. We're also noticing a lot of high variability in flow times, especially with things like security issues. And yeah, like the slide says, that the flow efficiency was going down, wait times were increasing, flow load was climbing, and the team was actually starting to feel like they were getting overwhelmed by the incoming and the interrupt, despite the fact that we didn't really have a lot of extra work incoming. So what we started to do was to work with the team. So one thing I really like about the flow metrics is that they give you sort of the 5,000 foot view on what's going on. And so even within the team, we kind of started to know that some things weren't having the outcomes that we really wanted to. So what we did is we got together and started to look at Viz, for example, this bottleneck view, to sort of look at what was going on, why our flow metrics were sort of trending in the wrong direction for the outcomes that we wanted. And what we found was that some of our practices were leading to bottlenecks like verification. So we knew that our flow times, for example, were much longer in some things than we wanted to, but it's not like the in progress work was really slowing down. It was more that we were taking on too many things at once, and we could see that our wait times were really high for some issues. So typically with us as well, because we're a platform team and we're doing operations, we get lots of small tasks coming through as well. So the wait times on the front and the back end are really important to being sort of efficient at getting things through. And with the bottleneck view, we were able to actually look at that where the low-hanging fruit was. So we could see in this slide, you could see verification. Things were waiting there, which isn't a great state to wait in, because you've created the value and you really just need to sort of deploy that and get that into our customers' hands, both internal and external. And what this was resulting in is people would take on new work before the verification was complete, which meant the whip counts were getting too high. Our Kanban process wasn't working quite as it should. So what I did is I got together with some people on the team to sort of champion the effort and to ask them, what do we do about this, instead of sort of telling them, make your verification time shorter. And they're able to look at Biz and say, yeah, I know exactly what we should do to make those things better, to have better outcomes on those. And some of the things we did was we started reviewing the metrics and bottlenecks more regularly at stand-ups and retros. Specifically for verification, that the teams were started to prioritize the peer reviews, both the done review, which is in verification, but also the code reviews. And they were able to do that when they started prioritizing that and getting the whip limit lower. Things were starting to move through much quicker, because one of the issues that you have when that sort of whip limit gets up is everybody's working on something a little bit different. So it becomes difficult for them to find time to do verification, because they have to think about what the person's working on and context switch a lot to do that. We also, we used to do sort of our scrum in the morning, and we moved it to the afternoon so that the entire morning right into the afternoon was uninterrupted by meetings, to free up sort of the most productive time of the day, which was the morning, for people just to focus on work. And like I said, we committed to timely peer reviews. And you also, one really important thing was to have a champion on each sort of squad within the PDS that were helping us keep good practices here and keep whip limits down, and doing more peer coding and sort of swarming on the issues as they came forward.
Awesome. So when you measured, what did you see?
So as you can see here, the wait times really went down. because a lot of that wait time was in sort of low-hanging fruit in the verification part. And not only did that improve the flow time and the flow efficiency, but more importantly, it was getting value out the door faster and also resulting in less work in progress. So it actually increased focus as well and made people feel better. And that often the flow load is what makes a team feel sort of overloaded. All the things coming in, and sort of waiting there to be done. So yeah, as you can see there, it helped a lot. We still had sort of the wait times from accepted, but the real problem was sort of the back end of just finishing things off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a result of the flow load went down, like I said, the context switching really reduced, because one of the things that we did is swarming on similar work, and that allowed the team to be able to context switch less when they're doing reviews and make reviews much quicker, say if you're doing pure coding.
Yeah. And one of the things you kind of mentioned before was that this also process kind of highlighted to you that maybe your Kanban practices weren't great. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I was talking a little bit about the WIP. So one of the things with Kanban is you really try to keep your WIP limit low, keep everybody working on the same things as much as possible until they're done. And what came out of that sort of discussion with the champions on the team is that there were certain parts of that weren't happening. So every time, basically, when somebody would finish something, they would, which was putting it into verification rather than it being done, they would go and take something new on. And so our WIP limit was just sort of increasing. And that was just, as anybody who works on one of these teams or has managed one of these teams, this is something that you kind of have to continuously improve. It's very easy to sort of slip back to not doing those good practices, but looking at the flow metrics, we were able, and talking to the team, they were able to identify where those practices had slipped and why that was actually sort of preventing us from delivering value to customers faster. Because one thing I didn't mention before is the other thing that was happening with the verification is you might find something and then you have to address that. Meanwhile, you have everything else open. So that again would sort of delay the delivery of things.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what, we see a lot with folks where they do stories of a feature sequentially instead of trying to parallelize the work as much as possible to shorten the flow time for the feature itself. And that's kind of what we're
Exactly.
highlighting here. Maintain the focus on getting that one thing done before moving on to take little bites out of other things.
Yeah, and as a result, with that increased focus, you're doing just as much, spending just as much time working, but you actually end up getting a lot more through due to that focus as well.
Awesome. Okay, now calling audience to ask your questions. I see one has already come in. And so we're going to ask one more, I'm going to pose one more question to David, which I think is going to be really helpful, and then take this one. So David, how do you categorize a platform team's work into the 4 flow items? Features, defects, risks, and debt. That's a question we get a lot, right?
Well, typically, I actually started just as a software developer on one of a couple of Tasktop products before, and I treat our features, defects, risk, and debt very similar to any sort of product development. There are things that sort of sit on the edge of that you have to kind of decide how you want to model it. So things like toil. So toil is an interesting one because it doesn't really cleanly fall in necessarily features, defects, risk, and debt. But sometimes toil can actually be adding value despite the fact that it's just toil, that it's sort of unredeeming work that's manual. And sometimes it's something completely entirely different, which doesn't fall into these, which is more of just dealing with sort of support requests, incident management, stuff like that, which will have defects that come out of them and everything. So for us, we follow sort of the typical model for development. So features are things that add value for us, and it doesn't have to just be for the external customers. It can also be for our internal customers. So is this work adding value? Then for us that's a feature. And it may not look like a traditional feature, but often it does. As a user, I would like to be able to automatically deploy my product. It often follows that. So I don't think there's any reason why you can't use that sort of lens when you're defining your work, but there are sort of things around the edges, and even for modern software development teams, they're starting to have to address these as well, right? So a lot of companies, including ours, have a you build it, you run it culture in their development organization. So they're starting to have to deal with things like toil and operations issues on an application level as well.
I see there's one question from Irfan, and I don't know if Irfan wants to go off mute to ask it, or we want to read it off the chat.
Sorry, this is Irfan. I was just curious in terms of the level of detail you look in part of your, as part of your drill down, whether you actually go down to the level of detail at looking at the Kanban board, and whether the Tasktop software allows that. You talked about adjusting the web limits, right?
Yeah,
that's where I was coming from.
Yeah, exactly. So I use Task. You can see some individual level in Viz, but what I actually use Viz for is to get the 5,000-foot view to drive the discussion with the team, to get them to sort of really get them to think about why that outcome is happening, because at the end of the day, they're sort of the experts and that they're in the middle of it, sort of thing, right? But in our stand-ups and daily, we do drill into it, especially when it comes to where the wait times are. Like I said, that bottleneck view, what's nice about that is it'll actually tell you where your wait times are, right? So the flow metric will say, this is your sort of aggregated wait time. You go look at the bottleneck view and you can kind of see where most of that wait time is going, because accepted and verification are wait times, and if those are the if verification is much bigger, where your wait time is going. So for us, as our tool, we use Jira, and it will have things like red dots for things that have been sitting. So you could say, well, why is this thing been sitting in verification so long, or why is this security issue been in progress for so long? This one thing I forgot to talk a little bit about, but like security issue implementation time is really long, and it had to do with a lot of scoping. So really what it does is it gives us the larger view of the outcome, so that we can then drill down in our daily work what's going on, and to be able to draw lines back to the larger flow metrics.
That's super, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great tie-in, actually, David, to, what have you learned about using the flow frame? Well, did I write this wrong? And what have you learned about the nature of your work by using the flow framework? Because there's definitely specific characteristics that you experience more than others. For example, you started talking about the fact that you guys have to deal with a lot of urgent security issues. So how does that manifest in your flow metrics?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the early things we kind of tried to do was use flow efficiency as sort of our target metric. And we very quickly learned that flow efficiency is sort of an indicator that you use to find problems and to explain certain behaviors on the team. But like you said, we're much more interrupt. So our flow efficiency will be quite a bit lower than some other teams. And one thing definitely about the flow framework is you can't really compare teams, because it's apples and oranges in terms of what you're working on, what your working practices are, and stuff like that. So flow efficiency was a really interesting one for us, because we actually have quite a low flow efficiency, but that's okay, given that the other metrics are sort of indicating things are going in the right direction. And the reason for that is because flow efficiency is the ratio of wait time and accepted. And so we try to keep our accepted queue predictable for teams, so they can tell approximately when things are going to move through. So we try to keep 2 weeks of flow load basically in the accepted queue. But a lot of our tasks sometimes, especially things like toil, can take less than a day. So your flow efficiency is low on that. Whereas if you're doing a higher ratio of feature development, like a traditional product team, your flow efficiency might be higher. So when we started to dig into why that was, it actually sort of, at first it was like, whoa, why is our flow efficiency so low? But it actually started to indicate where our sort of good practices are for that interrupt, because we are able to react quickly. So sometimes the flow metric indicators can just be completely different for the different teams. also because of the like that ratio, the the ratio of security to metrics and stuff. So we deal with a lot of operating systems and stuff. So we have a lot more exposure to security issues than an application. Well, an application might have 100 to 400 dependencies. We in an operating environment we can have 1,000. So we get lots of CVEs. So that means that we have to really leave ourselves open to interruption to always have sort of capacity to take that stuff as quickly as possible to make sure that we have good outcomes there. So flow time for security issues is really, really important, especially for high and critical security issues. But for certain other types of tech debt, as long as we're maintaining a good level of investment in R&D and tech debt, the flow time is not the same there. So not treating things as sort of equals was the big thing, sort of learning initially, and sort of learning about makes you think about your work practices and the things you have to optimize for in your particular context.
Yeah, so true. How often we explain that flow efficiency should not be an improvement target. Rather, it is a way to address bottlenecks that are impacting flow time and flow velocity. So never look at flow efficiency outside of context or as a goal unto itself, rather as a supporting means, because you can improve both active and wait times and your flow efficiency would stay the same. So, but the ultimate goal you've achieved because you've improved your flow time. So folks, does anybody have a question that you would like to unmute yourself to ask?
I'm sorry, I did not understand that point about not improving flow efficiency. Can you talk a little bit about why that's a bad idea? Why is it that active states and wait states would stay the same if you try to improve flow efficiency? Because I would think that if you are improving flow efficiency, then you would try to reduce handoffs, and that's how you can, for reducing handoffs, flow efficiency would be the first target that would get improved.
Yeah, so I can give sort of concrete examples of where that kind of goes opposite to, because you're absolutely right, and that's the type of thing that I thought of when I was looking at flow efficiency. And flow efficiency can indicate that, but not as like an absolute number. So the ratio, what typically you could get 100% flow efficiency if something waits for a day and is active for a day. So if you have really high wait times and really low active times, then you get low flow efficiency. That's the right way around, right, Naomi? I'm just making sure I'm saying the right thing. I believe that's the right.
Flow efficiency is the ratio of wait time out of total flow time.
Yes.
Right? So if wait time is your issue and you manage to reduce that, flow efficiency will go up. But if you reduce both the wait time and the active time, and that's valid to try to improve both, the flow efficiency, because it's a percentage, it might stay constant.
So we had cases where we were getting both really high wait times and really high sort of normal active times. And the best thing for us to improve was wait times. And the thing we improved actually had some really good outcomes on our team, but it actually lowered the flow efficiency because there were still issues in the accepted queue that had wait times attached to them and then once those got through, then we saw our flow efficiency go up. So sort of in short term, you can get flow efficiency drops from actually improving active times, for example.
So I have a last question for David, unless you guys want to chime in with more. I mean, I guess the question is, what are you looking to improve in your use of flow metrics going forward?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is starting to attach flow metrics to OKR key results is one thing that I've been experimenting with, including doing things like creating another product to track a specific KR that we have, say whether it's security or something like that across the teams. The other thing is sort of the use of business results. So I've been sort of light on my use of business results in there. I do use it for some things like EMPS and incidents and stuff like that. But sort of exploring how I can use business results to be able to drive the right level of investment that teams are having. So like incidents, for example, is one example of a business result, you could say, we're having too high of an incident. We have to, invest in this area, and to sort of keep exploring that, and to get more granular about headcounts. So for us, I've been sort of tracking headcounts on hiring and stuff like that. But when people go on sort of longer leaves and stuff, being able to model that headcount into our flow metrics, to be able to explain, to basically normalize the velocity, to be able to explain whether it's this change that made the change, to control more variables, basically. Because I find this very helpful for experiments on the team, and showing what the outcomes of those experiments are.